off and stuff with designs. Last time I did a video on tips of how to fursuit and just some general things that I've learned along my way of my experience, and I had to cut that video kind of short because it was getting kind of long, so this is the second half. I hope you enjoy. Another tip that I could probably give to you guys is don't be afraid to overcut your foam. Like, it's really scary, especially when, you know, especially if it's your sewer and you're like, oh, my baby, I don't really want to screw this up. And when you're cutting out foam, it just gets really worrying because you're like, oh, if I cut too much, like, you know, it'll go under the size that I want it to. But don't chill. Do not be afraid to overcut, because don't forget, if you make a mistake and just lop off a piece like I have done several times and then just go, why why did we do that, then don't panic, because you can actually glue foam back on, and it's always good to remember that yes, it's annoying when you chop off something that you didn't really want to, but it's not the end of the world. You can actually glue foam back on if you didn't get, if you make the mistake that you didn't want to. But basically what I did was, yeah, just be careful with cutting, but you know, if something happens and you lopped off a piece that you didn't want to, no biggie. So that's a big tip, is don't be afraid to overcut, because you can glue foam back on. And yeah, oh yes, a really big tip that I can give is do not start with a bad base. And I mean, the first time that I made Skittish, I started off with using just one of the basic styrofoam head bases that you can buy from any cheap store, arts and crafts store, whatever. But what happened was she became too small. So when I put her on my head, it was really, really tight and really uncomfortable. Because those styrofoam heads aren't made to fit everyone's head, and I've got a big noggin, so that was really fun. But the best way to make a styrofoam head fit yours is, this is Gertrude, hello, ignore my silly faces, but measuring, there's a styrofoam head underneath, as you can see, and what I did was basically I got a measuring tape and measured my own head, and then I stuck bits of foam, because I had a really ample amount of foam at the time around. I stuck bits of foam on until the measurements were the same size, and I'd suggest measuring like here, here, and here, and maybe, you know, your neck if you're like me and you look like an ogre. But I will actually put up a tutorial on how to do making a styrofoam head fit yours a little bit later, but just always start with a good base, because if you start with a crappy base, then basically your head will it'll just go downhill from there. There has been a friend of mine who did a really bad base, and her head basically fell apart. So always start with a base head that fits yours. If you can, like a lot of people, like me for an example, can't afford to do those like those resin heads that are like an exact mold of your face, or glass heads or wooden heads or whatever. So if you're, you know, a bit of a povo bogan like me, that's a cheap, easy way to do a styrofoam head that can actually fit yours, and that way you've got a good base to start on. Another one is, oh yeah, constantly keep your foam under control. And not just foam, but fur, because you turn into a little foam monster every time that you're carving or cutting foam. And when I first started fursuiting, and like I decided, okay, today I'm gonna do like the cheeks and the nose, I would just smash it out until those things were done, and then by the end of it I was just covered from head to toe in foam, and it was everywhere. Like, you could be foaming inside, and somehow the foam would be outside in your car, and I found bits of fur fibers and foam in my toothbrush, and even though I was like, you know, in a room, so it didn't make any sense. But yeah, keep your foam under control. So like, you know, if you're doing a cheek, do one. It's really annoying because you just want, I know when you get into those moods, you just want to keep going, but you can't, because if you keep going, then you're gonna get more mess and more mess and more mess. And yeah, that's really, really hard. And it's really fun trying to clean up afterwards. And oh, speaking of cleaning up, do not vacuum up foam, because as I found out just this week, so I'm still making mistakes, hashtag mistake queen, don't vacuum foam, always sweep it or use a brush or something, because my mum suggested I vacuumed up the foam because she said it would be easier for me to do. Turns out it wasn't, because the vacuum then set fire. I have a very good knack of setting fire to things, especially vacuums, glue guns, and the kitchen whenever I cook. So don't vacuum foam, because it will get stuck in your vacuum and it will cause it to explode. Always sweep it up. And if, I mean, I suppose, like, you know, if you've got the smaller pieces of foam, like, or little bits of glue, then you can use one of those handheld vacuums, which I don't have, but I still suggest not. Unless you're constantly emptying that vacuum out, just don't use it. Just use a brush, do it the hard way. You're gonna have a fun time doing it, but in the end of the day, you won't be spending thousands of dollars on a new vacuum. Another tip is be in a well-ventilated area, because you're using things like foam and hot glue that, when at high temperatures, can be quite toxic. And again, hashtag queen of mistakes. When I first started fursuiting, I decided it would be a good idea to do it in a bedroom and with no doors, fans, or windows open. Why not? I ended up making myself very sick because I kept breathing in foam pieces and fur fibers and glue fumes, and I ended up vomiting blood for a long time. A little bit TMI there, but that's the extent of basically how sick I got. So don't do that. Just be in a well-ventilated area like this. Like, there's my kitchen there, and I'm at the kitchen table. Or be outside, but maybe not go outside just because the foam will get everywhere. But yeah, basically be in a well-ventilated area. Don't lock yourself in a room and without windows, fans, or doors open, because fur fibers and foam fibers and very hot glue foam fumes are very toxic and very bad for you. Yes, another one, just a weird tip that's going to be quite short. If I don't tend to do this, but a lot of people tend to struggle with getting symmetry on point, so on point. Tip that I would probably suggest is, when you've got it on your foam head or styrofoam head, drawing a line down the middle from your styrofoam head all the way up, and that way, you know, basically, when you've got your base and then adding on the features, because then that way you can kind of see then the symmetry. And don't be too worried if it's not perfect, because these are animals, and like everything in nature, complete symmetry isn't a huge deal, because everything is always lopsided, or, like, you know, have a general line of perfection, but don't go over the top like I tend to do and spend 3 hours just carving one piece of foam, because you need it to be perfect. So, I suppose these are my suits, so I'm doing it for me, so I suppose, yeah, but, like, you know, don't be too obsessed about getting it perfect, and don't be too worried if, you know, there's some things that are off, because, like I said, these are animals, and they're gonna be different. But yeah, another thing is to draw templates, and when in doubt, template out. And even if you have to draw a completely different template, because, you know, you're like me and you lose things quite easily too. But basically, you know, draw a basic template and then go from there. Don't be afraid to spend hours on a template making sure it's perfect, because don't forget that the less time you can spend fixing up pieces of foam that you could have avoided if you just did the template right, the better. Another one would be to get glue sticks. Go to cheap stores. Yeah, a lot of people say don't do that because, you know, the glue isn't as high a quality. Actually, I have used glue sticks from everywhere, from cheap stores to stuff that I've found in a garbage bin, to a friggin' $6 packet for like 10 glue sticks. But glue is like foam. Glue is like foam. Does not matter where you find it. It's pretty much the same. And if you can spend $2.50 on a 10 pack or $8, I'm pretty sure I'm going to pick the $2.50 one, because I can barely afford bread. So glue sticks from cheap stores or cheaper places, perfectly fine, and I highly recommend it. Probably, this video is getting kind of long, so I'm just gonna blast through a few of these ones. Big thing is finding your own style. Don't steal anyone else's style, because that's really rude, because a lot of those people have spent years trying to find the style that makes them, you know, unique, especially if they sell to other people. But yeah, like, it's okay to sort of reference somebody else's style and then modify it, because, well, that's pretty much life. You see what other people do and then try and do it better. But basically, find your own style. If you think that this looks good, then go for it. Like, don't, just because it looks weird to somebody else doesn't mean that it's not good, because other people have different, like, art, it's art, okay? It is art. Art invokes a lot of different opinions in a lot of people, so don't be afraid to do something that's completely different and unique. I specialize in tuni and kimono style suits, especially kimono chibi styles now, because I've sort of moved away from the tuni stuff, but I still do it. But basically, I've got my own style going on, and forever I'd beat myself up because I'm like, it doesn't look like theirs. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't look like theirs, because each character is unique and your style is unique. Like, look at Picasso, look at Picasso, and all those artists out there that are super famous that aren't even fursuiters, but their styles were different and unique at the time, and they probably thought, you know, why doesn't my style look like theirs? But it was what was best for them. So if you want to have a super big nose on your fursuits, then do it. If you want to have really tiny, cute little eyes or cute little nosies, then do it. Because just do whatever makes you happy and do whatever, you know, looks the best to you, because that's important. Yeah. And don't be afraid to screw up your first attempts like I do, because like I said, queen of mistakes, that every mistake you make, you now know how not to do that. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, and if your first fursuit that you make looks like absolute trash, then hashtag furrotrash. Like, you know, you just own that stuff, because you're starting off somewhere, so don't be too harsh like I was on myself. That, you know, that I hated the fact that Skittish looked the way she did, especially compared to some of my other friends' suits who, to be honest, had bought their suits and stuff, and so it was like, oh, but mine doesn't look like theirs, and it's like, well, yeah, because you're new, and this is your first attempt, so, you know, pats on the back for actually giving it a go, and, you know, not being afraid to try something. So don't be afraid if your first attempt looks like crap, because a lot of things in life, first attempts look like crap, but you'll get better from there on inwards. And like, literally just looking at new Skittish and old Skittish, like, you can see the massive difference that I went between these two. And that was just in a period of 2 suits of the same character in about a year and so. And that wasn't even like constantly pushing that stuff out like every day. That was like when I can work on it sort of thing. So, oh yeah, movable jaws. Don't sew the elastic onto the bottom of the balaclava. I've just found that works for me because I struggle so goddamn hard with movable jaws. With movable jaws, I found the best way to do it myself. Again, this is all my own opinions of what I've learned, so if it's different for you, then do it. But I found that sewing the elastic onto the very bottom of the balaclava, that was a big thing that screwed up my movable jaws. So having, like, you know, have it sewn here, but not here, or if you do, just tack it lightly. Don't sew it. Actually, no, just don't sew it, because I found that pretty much balaclavas only have so much amount of movement, and if you sew the elastic on, it's still only going to move as much as the balaclava does. And if you want a more movable jaw than just, you know, the flap of fabric, then don't. Just don't sew on the elastic at the bottom. Just sew it from here and these 2 points here so that it's anchored properly, but just don't do the bottom. Although, just a little weird tip that I learned. This is just purely like an aesthetic sort of tip, so you don't have to, but I like it. I stuffed my tongue with like teddy bear stuffing or pillow stuffing, and I just thought, you know, it's cute that way, and you can get this little cute little pudgy tongue that, you know, if you're going for that more sort of like, you know, chibi effect like I do, then yeah, it was just cute, and that's why I like to do it, because Skittish's old tongue wasn't stuffed and it was kind of like a bleh. A weird fluffy bit of fabric. And like, don't get me wrong, like that's cool, but for me, I like the stuffingness of the tongue because then it looks cute and plushy and sweet. But yes, oh, I will be adding a tutorial very soon on how to make silicone molds really cheaply, because if you're like me and you are a cheap ass broken, you cannot afford to buy silicone molds online and stuff, so I tend to make my own. And basically, the easiest way to make a silicone mold I found was buying the silicone, but make sure it's like 100% silicone. And basically I just put it in a container and put the thing that I wanted to mold in and then let that set. I will be adding a tutorial later on how to do that, but basically there is cheap ways to make silicone molds, so do not freak out, especially if you want to do noses, teeth, etc. Claws, like I do. These are all resin claws, which also a weird little side tip. Do not make your resin claws too thick like I did, because they fell out several times, and I've just recently glued them back in, but if they fall out again, I'll be making new ones. So yeah. You can use paint for your eyes on buckram. Just be very careful not to plug the holes. So how I sort of did that was, if you've got the paintbrush, to just stab at the paint, or use a sponge even more, but just basically, if you do it on paper as well, if you paint it on paper, when you're done, you rip it off and all the paint comes away, and it like stays on the paper if you push it through hard enough. That was an awkward motion. But basically, then that way, because you need to be able to see through the buckram, so if it's clogged up with paint, it's kind of useless. So yeah, that's a big tip, is use a sponge or just, stab at it. Oh, a weird tip, kind of like the whole don't sit in a ventilated room suiting, is I found that every time when I was furring or foaming, and I had a drink nearby, where do you think all the foam and fur ended up? That's right, in my drink, or in my food. Like I was eating sandwiches for about months and months after I'd stopped suiting on this one suit, and I was still eating fur fibers and stuff, finding it in my sandwiches, like, oh, that's lovely. But basically, get a closed bottle, and yes, this is a baby's bottle, but that's because I am a toddler at heart. But also because I like the little knobbly squishy thing that's cute to eat. But basically, yeah, just get a closed-in bottle. That way you can have juice and water, and even I drink a lot of tea and a lot of coffee, so iced coffees, weakness. But yeah, that way you can have your drink and stuff, and foam and fur is not going to go into your drink, and you're not drinking that stuff because that stuff is bad. So yeah, there's just a few little random tips from me, and I will be uploading this video as soon as I can, but I hope it's Friday here, so I hope everyone has a fantastic Fursuit Friday, and thank you very much for watching my video and for having 100 followers. So I love all of you, my surfettes, and I hope that you're having a great day. Love and kisses from Admin Sassy Cat. Bye!